in contemporary literature, but at the age of 23, Alla was arrested as part of the DOXA journal case and was under house arrest for a year and was facing imprisonment for up to 3 years for disseminating or being a part of a video which was basically stating the rights of student protesters. So today Alla will talk a little bit about her story, her political journey, and she will also read from her book, her collection of poetry called Fish Called Rivka. This is a second edition of the book that the first edition sold out really quickly. We specifically, for this event, we've reprinted a second edition of this book, which you can buy downstairs. And also we will have like a moment at the end where Alla can sign the book. Is that right? Yeah, so today is going to be a bit of a kind of more of just giving space to Alla to talk about, read some of her poetry, talk about everything she wants to talk about, and for about an hour, and then we'll have a Q&A, so we can all, I can ask Alla questions, you can all ask Alla questions. Yeah, anything else? Does that sound good? Yeah, cool, okay.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming here today, and I want to thank Pushkin House for hosting this event and giving me the opportunity to speak about my story and about the stories of other political prisoners. Every time now I talk about my story, I wish to highlight that I feel that it was a lucky story. And it might sound a bit weird, a lucky story of political persecution, but retrospectively, I know that it was lucky in a way that it was lacking real physical imprisonment, and lucky because it was lacking torture, unlike many other cases. And having said that, I could start my talk. A lot of the times now I have this situation when people approach me at a party or at some public event and they go, "Oh, I think I've seen you somewhere. I know your face. You know, have we met before? We went to school together." And before I would normally say, "Oh, I work as a model, so probably you've seen me online." But now I answer, "Oh, probably Criminal Chronics." And then people are like, "Oh yeah, sure, Criminal Chronics. Hey, nice to meet you." So here are the faces from the Criminal Chronics. So this is Armen Ramyan. He's a founder of DOXA journal, and he was majoring in philosophy and anthropology. Then we have Volodya Metolkin. Actually, we are lucky enough to have him in the audience today, so if you wish, you could chat afterwards. And Volodya was majoring in history, and Natasha Tishkevich, she was digital humanities specialist and also majoring in history, and I was majoring in cultural studies. And we were all connected because we were all part of student online magazine DOXA. It was left-wing magazine focusing on inequality and violence and on the ways, to resist this inequality and violence. And back then, that was a student magazine, so we were mostly focusing on the problems within academia. Let's say we were talking a lot about sexual harassment or accessibility within university, etc., etc. And for sure, we were covering protests and we were covering political activity. So this is a screenshot from a 3-minute video we made back in 2021 when, I'm pretty sure you know that, but for those who are not really familiar with contemporary history of Russia. When Alexei Navalny was poisoned, then he was treated in Germany in Charité, and then he went back to Russia to fight the regime, was immediately arrested, and there were protests all over the country in support of him. So we made this 3-minute video saying a very simple thing. You have a legal right to resist. That was it. That was one and only message. It would address to young people, to students, and to school kids, but of like older age. And we were just, having our lines one by one, and mine was the last one, and I was finishing the whole video by the words, "The authorities have declared war against the youth, but we are the youth, and we're gonna win." Very simple message, 3 minutes. We posted it on YouTube. 4 days after that, we were made to take it down by internet security police, something like that, Roskomnadzor. And then 2.5 months later, I woke up from a very loud knock on the door. And I opened the door, which you should never ever do if you live in Russia. And it was 6 a.m. in the morning, and there were 5 men wearing black balaclavas, bulletproof vests, and carrying guns. And for a moment, I thought they kind of were mistaken. They knocked on the wrong door, because I never ever done something illegal. We were even quoting the Constitution in our video, but they were not mistaken. And they confiscated my passport, my international passport. And because of that, now I have this very, very rare and weird German document, which is called Grey Passport. And it's something like a Nansen passport for foreigners, for those who don't have any international documents and, don't have any ability or possibility to get one from their motherland. And then when they were trying to explain what has happened, they asked me Alla Mikhailovna, have you, participated in this video? And I was like, yeah, I'm a model. I've participated in a lot of videos. Which one are you talking about? They're like, this DOXA one. And I think I laughed with relief, because about this one, I was absolutely sure it's fine. We even showed the text to the lawyer before publishing that, and the lawyer encouraged us to publish it, and he said it's really cute, and and he really loved the Constitution quotes. So yes, I kind of understood it's not that harsh, and then a couple of minutes later, I also thought of some strategy that I could use. I'm a feminist, and each day of my life I do hate patriarchy, but that time I was like, okay, maybe I could use it to my advantage. So I went to the wardrobe and I took the most, the pinkest and the fluffiest clothes I could find there, and I put it on, and I started talking in a very high, childish and feminine voice, because I figured out that this way they probably won't hurt me. And I was thinking probably they would think of their, not children, because they were more or less my age, and I was 23 back then, but probably of their sisters or girlfriends, and that was my weapon. And later, I discovered that my mom, who is a mother of 5, also had a police raid that same morning. And I discovered that she used the exact same strategy, but not with this pink clothes, but she just took her youngest daughter, who was 3 at the time. So she went to open up the door holding a baby in her hands. And then the prosecutor was like, oh, we are so sorry. And he literally sent away all of the bulletproof vests, guys back to sit in the car. And they were just drinking tea with my mom for some time. So yeah, for me, it was something I found power in. But I also guess that at some point I was a little bit overplaying, because I asked them if their guns are real. And they reacted in a way that we don't really understand why do we arrest, school kids now? Like, how old is she? And then also I was living with two of my fellow students. We were all at our final year in cultural studies, and they were asking them really, passionately not to confiscate their computers, because in a couple of months we were supposed to handle our, thesis, and they said, okay, but then you need to show everything that is in there. So then for a couple of hours, my friends were showing them all of their essays, explaining to siloviki, to police officers, who Donna Haraway is, translating some French essays. And that was actually fun in a way that normally the police raid is quite absurd. They are looking for something they don't really know because they just want to arrest you, and there's no real business in there. And I personally was mostly worried about my book shelves, because I knew that I had a lot of anarchist literature in there. And when they were raiding Armen Rahman's house, the prosecutor asked, why so many books? And then DOXA made a meme out of that. We had the stickers why so many books, for sure. But yeah, in the end, I thought that, okay, now it's gone. Now I could go back to my life. But they said, oh no, dress up because we're going to Investigative Committee. Okay. So that's me trying to read Jacques Derrida, because, I still need to write on my thesis, and some Silavik, and we probably, I wouldn't say we became friends, but as I mentioned, I was playing a little bit too passionately, so at some point he, I think, got really worried about me and about my fate, so he decided to help me, not only psychologically, but practically. And here is a tiny documentary poem on that. And when I recite it, I always say it's documentary, because otherwise people don't believe me, but it is documentary. So, a short story to make people cry. When they were taking me for interrogation after the raid, in an unmarked white van, one of the guards gently turned his phone to me and typed 4 words, Russia will be free. And after that, he also, on his phone, he searched for Constitution, and he showed me article number 51. And for those who are not from Russia, article 51 allows you not to witness against yourself. So, in a way, my strategy worked. And the same day, after our first police raid, we also had our first interrogation at the Investigative Committee and our first court hearing. And I think it's probably one of the most famous pictures of me, and we also used it to promote this event. The fact that always melts my heart, and almost no one knows, is that I'm wearing pajamas at this picture. And the story behind is as follows. When they said, okay, dress up, we're going to Investigative Committee, knowing the history of USSR and the history of Russia, and, having been reading news for a while, first thing that pissed my mind was torture, because you never know what they're going to do to you behind closed doors. So I decided to dress up in pajamas of my beloved to let it protect me and save me. And luckily, nothing like that ever happened with me. But yeah, here is the story. In this picture, I'm wearing pajamas. And this very day, we became political prisoners. We were prohibited from talking to each other, from using any source of communication, including internet, mobile phones, correspondence. And most importantly, we were prohibited from leaving our homes. Or to be precise, we were only allowed to leave our homes for 1 minute, from 23:59 to midnight. And probably that was a running answer to our message, like, oh, you're gonna win, you wanna resist us, okay, here's your 1 minute, please, enjoy it. And also we had this monitoring ankle bracelets that were always, they couldn't really know where we are, but they could know whether we are at home or not. So we were always controlling us. And a bit later, they were so generous to expand this 1 minute to 2 hours in the morning. It was from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And we used it to our advantage a lot. Let's say we were making flash mobs outside court, or sometimes I would invite photographers to, my place to follow me on this morning walk. Or once this journal, it's like feminist out-of-fiction journal, Nieznanie, like not knowing, they launched a presentation specifically for us at 8 a.m. so we could be among the guest list. And at some point, we also decided to use those 2 hours to get married with our partners because, as Olga said, we could have been facing up to 3 years in prison. And when you're in prison, when you're in Russian prison, they don't really ask you, who's your beloved and are you wearing their pajamas? They only want you to be legally, officially married. So we decided to do that. And we were really, celebrating. And we were 17 minutes late back to house arrest. And we thought, that's not such a big deal because, Russia is such a traditional country. They should be proud of us. We were getting married, traditional families. But they said, congrats, now we want you to go to pretrial jail because you were breaking rules of the house arrest. And for a couple of hours that day in court, we really didn't know if we are going to pretrial jail or if we're returning back home to our house arrest. But then, in the end of the day, they said, okay, fine, we forgive you. Go live your married traditional life back at your house arrest. And at some point, I discovered that I start to lose myself because you live under constant pressure. You go to endless interrogations that are absolutely useless. Like, you don't talk to the investigators there. They ask you questions. You always say, I'm taking, Article 51, so you're not answering questions. But they still want to take all of the time of your life. And then I discovered that I actually have a gift that I could use. And thinking about that, I always think of Michel de Certeau's Strategies and Tactics, and also Weapon of Weak of James Scott, because my only weapon was a tiny pink notebook that I was hiding under the table in the Investigative Committee. But this tiny pink notebook was absolutely changing the game and changing the power dynamics and the power relations, because you're thinking that you're interrogating me. Oh no, it's not what's happening. I'm writing a poem. You are a character in my poem. I am interrogating you. You think that I'm here, suffering from boredom, suffering from pressure, from repression. Oh no, I'm witnessing, because yes, now you are taking me to court and now you are taking me to trial, but also we all know that we're gonna have another trial, gut trial, terrible trial if we use Lermontov's words, and now I am witnessing. And with this, it's because you don't have a lot of the things left, right? They took your life, they took your freedom, they took your mental health, because I can say I was like so traumatized that I was just falling asleep in the middle of conversation because it was just too much, and my psyche couldn't take it. But there are some things that they can't take from you. They can't take from you your hopes, your dreams, your words, your body. And also back then I shaved my head bald because I figured out I don't need to pretend to be such a childish and feminine person anymore, because it looks like we probably gonna be more or less safe, in a way that it was like a minor criminal thing. And and actually I forgot to mention what they were accusing us of. And that's probably the most absurd thing in the whole story. So we were accused of involving minors in life-threatening acts with our video. But what was the logic behind that? The logic was as follows. The minors could watch our video, get inspired, go out on a protest, get COVID, and die. And therefore, we are responsible for, the minors' death. In following this weapon of the week or strategy or tactic, 2 months after the raid, after the beginning of arrest, I wrote this poem. It's called the Swan song of Shira, Shirim. And in Russian it also has like «Вы не путайте сыны, день конца и дочь весны» from Vidensky. And I would like to recite a fragment from it. And this one is not translated, but it's the opening of the poem, so it's really dear to my heart, and I would recite that in Russian, but the further parts are translated. Середина апреля, раннее утро, не над Вавилоном, край ночи. Картина Репина не ждали, пижама в цветочек. В дверь раздается звонок. Я подхожу и смотрю в глазок. Я платье сняла, как надену, ноги омыла, как их замараю. Почему я встала у стенки? У меня дрожат коленки. Вторжение. 10 мужчин в прихожей. Говорит Москва, началась война. На стене девушка с котенком Фрейда. У меня тоже. Кончается воздух. And for those among you who are Russophone, here is this whole poem that I'm reciting, but unfortunately in Russian. So it's a YouTube video. If you wish to watch it like in full version, please follow the QR code. And here are some of the translated parts. How much time do you need to get dressed? Captivity. Babe alone in Babylon. Baby Bambi in the lap of Babylon. Gentle tread, light step, with a gentle tread to the animus camp. You don't care if you go down in history as barbarians. Have you heard of the butterfly effect, barbarians? And the last one from this poem, reflecting on the history of Russian protest. How to address you, uninvited guests, chucklers, jail wardens, Pythias, Greer, doctors of my body. I'm your banded bird, but the human soul knows no chuckles. Didn't they teach you that in school? Stop, stop, gentlemen of the jury. I've seen this movie before. Надето окно, clenched fist, clenched teeth, no pasaran. Alexandra Dukhanina, eyes blindfolded, riot police cutting off her windpipe. February, May, 2012, I'm 13, outside politics. I'm young, they're raging. I'm old, they're raging. Poetry in front of monuments. Which balaclava for you? A color or black? Same songs, same posters, same slogans. Go away, winter. Morning paints with gentle light. Nemtsov is killed. Heroes don't die. 2015, I'm 16. Spring. My first beloved says over the phone, "No, don't go anywhere. This is Russia. Nothing will ever change." I remember this conversation to this day. You don't want problems, do you? You don't want problems. You don't want problems, my angel. The angel of history. Eyes, mouth, wings. And I'm pretty sure all of you do know Nadya Tolokonnikova from Pussy Riot. But I want to talk now about Alexandra Dukhanina. And she's a very important and dear person to me, even though we never ever met or talked. And the reason is a lot of people, knowing I'm an ex-political prisoner, they would approach me and say, "You're so brave. We admire you. We're so proud of you." And I always feel a bit kind of confused at that moment, because talking about DOXA case, I've never ever made this decision. I never thought it would lead to such consequences. The lawyer said it was all fine. But there was a day in my life where I did make a decision. And it was back in summer 2019, when there was the Moscow case, and I was there, and I had to decide whether I'm going out on a protest or not. And how can you make such a decision? It's dangerous, but you don't have enough information. And I tried to figure out, I think it was like second or third year of my undergrad, and the last huge protests were 7 or 6 years ago, 2012, Bolotnaya, and the only female political prisoner I knew was Alexandra Dukhanina. She was trained as translator, she was anarchist, feminist, vegan, and I looked up her story. So she spent 2 years under house arrest, and she had monitoring ankle bracelet on her feet, and she got married under house arrest. And I read her whole story and was like, okay, if that is the worst that could happen, I'll do it. That's fine. And 2 years after, it's like, okay, you said fine, here you go, knock knock on the door. And now let me turn to collective actions, because I think probably 2 months later we figure out, probably even sooner than that there is actually no way to check if we're talking to each other or not, because all of the restrictions are absolutely absurd, and there's no way of checking except for, the house arrest one, because they would always see if we're at home or not. But we started not only talking, but we also started cooperating. And our case was absurd. There was no evidence. So we decided to highlight that with what we had at hand. And what we had at hand were our clothes, our costumes. So here we are at the 1st of September, the beginning of school year in Russia, telling them that we need to be at university and actually writing our dissertations. Here we are dressed as animals and saying that it's a circus or zoo or something like that. And at some point, I think interrogators got ready to our performances, but we continued doing that also because it was really important for the support group, which I'm gonna talk a bit more later. At one court hearing, we asked everyone to come dressed in merch of independent media and different human rights organizations. And here Armen is holding scarf saying "Будет хуже," it's gonna get worse, and he was right. And here we ask everyone to come dressed as a rainbow, to have some, queer happiness opposed to gray and black walls and absolute boredom of investigative committee. And another way of making it more political and more radical was the social media. We were also prohibited from using it, but you just say that you have someone posting that on your behalf, and then you could be having your each day diary there. So mine was called Alla Reported, and I used my Instagram to hold like public diary every day. I was counting days. I was saying like Alla Reported day 2071, and then what's happening. So here is one of these poetic reports. Alla reported, I'm afraid again of 1. Dogs, 2. Staying alone in the apartment, 3. Rings of the doorbell, 4. People step in the stairwell, 5. Sounds of parking cars. Yesterday, in the shower, every 3 minutes, I turned off the water because it seemed to me that they were breaking into the apartment. They were repaving the asphalt. Today, a police car under the window, and I began to listen to my heart. It beat like a fish thrown up onto shore, and like a drum. At some point, we also decided to make our performances more public, since we discovered that the court hearings are absolutely useless and absurd, and we could be saying anything. They're not, letting us out. We encouraged DOXA followers to make tiny donations, and for that, send us ridiculous words, like very rare animals or some just like funny sounding words, and then we promised to insert them into our court speeches. And we had a lot of fun with this. I don't know about the judge because she was not commenting on that, but we had a lot of fun. And Volodya had a very vivid line with saying that he's a pivosaur. It's something like a beer dinosaur who loves beer, and he really needs to break the house arrest because he's like such a huge fan of beer, and he needs to be going out, to a pub. And I once got Databayo Sasuke, but I know nothing of like anime culture, so to kind of make it work, I had to recite Всеволод Некрасов's poem in courtroom saying "Свобода есть, свобода есть, свобода есть, свобода есть, свобода." Freedom is freedom is freedom is freedom. And I was also reciting my favorite poet, Mikhail Grona. So like soon we discovered that we could say anything because it's not influencing anything, and we were having a lot of fun, and also creating this like sense of community, because you could have your saying at a court hearing, even if your saying is something like pen, pineapple, apple, pen, but still, you could be there in the courtroom. And also, we started decorating our monitoring ankle bracelets. I think even before we were talking to each other, I once saw at the Investigative Committee that Natasha is decorating hers, and I'm like, I want to do the same thing. So here it says, I'm afraid, don't be afraid. And we were just changing them and trying, to also provide some messages with them. And this is, I think, is probably one of our best performances. It was called Anyone Can Become a Political Prisoner. And we asked our support group to come wearing DIY ankle bracelets to the court hearing. So you could see that someone is wearing like Apple Watch, someone is wearing rose and even mushrooms on their leg. And the idea was that we were more or less random people. We were not only like 4 of us in DOXA. It was a huge media organization, which was horizontal. We were just like randomly picked to be, in a way, space scouts, but it could happen to anyone. And I told you a lot about writing, but also a lot of reading was involved, because we had 212 volumes of our criminal case. 212. And we were supposed to read all of it. And for sure, it had nothing to do with us. These were reports from interrogations of young people all over Russia who were either arrested on demonstrations or were doing some other some other suspicious activity. And this was, I have to say, an extraordinary interesting material, to a group of researchers majoring in history, anthropology, cultural studies, philosophy. We were just mesmerized by that. A lot of kids were, for sure, some of them were literally kids, 10 or 12 years old, brought to interrogation. Some of them were a bit older, but most of them, they understood that they can't say truth. So they were coming up with a very cute and funny excuses like, oh, I was not at a demonstration. I was just going on a date to McDonald's or something like that. But some of the kids were also telling the truth. They would say, our country is ruled by a bunch of liars and, corrupted criminals. We want Navalny to be free. We want Putin, to be thrown out of his throne. And we were reading all of this. And also this one is, it's like a tiny funny story because apart from reading 212 volumes of our criminal case, I was also reading a lot of feminist and queer literature back then. And once I came with a book of Virginie Despentes called King Kong Theory, and wearing a blue wig, just because I was so inspired by this radical feminist. And it turned out that this day, I was not just having a casual meeting with our regular investigator, but I was invited to the office of a chief investigator of the whole criminal case. And it was quite an awkward situation. He was not ready for this. I was not ready for this, but I was there in a blue wig reading King Kong Theory, and he was just giving me some papers to sign, and I was just, having my book and then asking Laura, should I sign? He's like, do it. And then I did it and then went back to reading my, feminist philosophy. So, we had this court, so each side should kind of provide their arguments. So these were their arguments. They were trying to prove that we are we, and for that they made this fodder, expert analysis, trying to show us that we made the video, which we never denied. And with this, I have to say, they told me that I have huge ears and almond-shaped eyes, which I actually took as a compliment because that's, a very Jewish feature. So I was like, thank you, that's sweet. But our arguments were stronger than that. So here you could see Slavoj Žižek reciting his monologue at the court, and we literally made the prosecutor and the judge listen to Žižek for 15 minutes. And they were also not ready for that, but we were not asking. And Žižek was actually a friend of DOXA because he was invited before to one of the summer schools and he came to Russia to teach. So he was having this really passionate monologue that we are the future of Russia, and if they want to imprison us, they're really stupid and something like that. So I don't know, probably that people always ask us do you know why they didn't throw you in prison in the end? Now probably that was his monologue because it was very argumentative, a philosopher. And actually, I'm making jokes about that, but I guess that the main reason is that we had such a huge support group, and that was because I guess we were kind of parts of different social groups. We were activists, we were students, we were, young scholars, and also just in terms of our age, we were quite young. So this is the picture from our last court hearing, and I think there were around probably 200 people near the court. And here is Moscow State University in a flash mob. Here is Novaya Gazeta newspaper that unfortunately they somehow don't have Volodya on it, which is weird. But Yeah, it was like a huge newspaper. So yeah, there was like a lot of protest activity, and because of that, we were really seen. Our voices were amplified. So, we had a lot of publicity, and also we had a lot of just physical support, because people were gathering in front of the courts, people were shouting our names, people were giving us like tiny gifts, and also young people, and not only young people, all over Russia were supporting us, like writing us letters, encouraging us, and for sure in this way it was much easier to go through this experience. And then the full-scale war started, and almost at the same time Russia imposed war censorship. But a couple of days before that, we went to the court hearing wearing clothes in the colors of Ukrainian flag, and then participating in a flash mob, women in black, together with our families. And then quite soon we had to give our final statements, our last words. And mine was called Be Like Children, say 2 + 2 = 4. And it's been translated not only to English, but to, I think, all in all, 11 languages. And also, probably that's like my most famous, poetry or prose piece. And also, a lot of the times people tell me like I'm so brave that I made this speech. But I have to say, back then, I hated myself so much, because I was so much afraid that I couldn't use a word war in my last word. Because of the war, censorship, and I was totally mentally tortured, and I was not ready for any new persecution. So I tried to make my word as allegorical, as poetic, as metaphorical as I could, trying to say what I need to say that, make this anti-war statement, but also trying to avoid another imprisonment. And we were not showing our last words to each other. And when I come to the courtroom and I hear that Armen and Volodya, they are actually mentioning Irpin and Bucha and Mariupol, and they're actually talking about war as if there's no censorship at all. And I had very mixed feelings, because first of all, I was so proud of them, and I was so proud that they are braver than me. They could, they could make their word literally last. But also I was so afraid, because I thought that afterwards, just, policemen gonna come into courtroom and take them. But luckily it never happened. But still, that's the backstory of this last word, and the explanation why it is so allegorical. So here are a couple of quotes. I often feel like a little fish, a small bird, a school kid, or a baby. But recently I was astonished to learn that Brodsky too was only 23 at his trial. And since I too have been put in the ranks of humanity, I will say it like this. In the Kabbalah, there is the concept of tikkun olam, the repair of the world. I see that the world is imperfect. I believe that, as Yehuda Michai wrote, the world is beautifully made for doing good and for resting, like a park bench, not a court bench. I believe that the world was created for tenderness, hope, love, solidarity, for passion and joy. But there is a terrible, unbearable amount of violence in the world, and I do not want violence, not in any form. I do not want teachers' hands down schoolgirls' underwear. I do not want drunken fathers' fists beating the bodies of their wives and children. Were to list all the violence that I am aware of, there would not be enough days, weeks, or years. To start seeing violence, one simply has to open their eyes. My eyes are open. I see the violence, and I do not want it. The more violence there is, the more I do not want it. And most of all, I do not want the greatest, the most terrible violence. I know some people are afraid. They choose silence. But Audre Lorde says, your silence will not protect you. On the Moscow subway, the public announcement says, passengers are forbidden to stay on trains headed to a dead end. The lyrics by the Petersburg band Aquarium continue, this train is on fire. And the very last words of the last word, remember that fear eats the soul. Remember the character from Kafka who saw a gallows being set up in the prison yard, mistakenly thought it was for him, escaped from his cell at night and hanged himself. Be like little children. Do not be afraid to ask yourselves and others what is good and what is bad. Do not be afraid to say that the emperor has no clothes. Do not be afraid to scream, to burst into tears. Repeat to yourself and to others, 2 + 2 = 4. Black is black, white is white. I'm a human, I'm strong and brave. We are strong and brave. Freedom is the process by which you develop a practice for being unavailable for servitude. Here are some of the translations. Probably you could find one in your mother language. And in the end, it was a happy end. Happy end by having so the punishment was not prison, but 2 years of corrective labor. And it sounds like not very nice, but we were so happy. And also we knew that once they take off our, bracelets, we leave the country for good. And now we're all on wanted list and arrested in absentia. But back then we were so happy. And, you could see from my face. And also, for those who are familiar with Jewish culture, that was Pesach, so the holiday of freedom and escaping slavery. So I was super happy. And since then, I've actually talked a lot about my imprisonment in various surroundings and in psychotherapy, addressing PTSD, post-traumatic disorder. There's like this method called prolonged exposure, and I feel that I've talked through the story so much that sometimes I don't even feel that that's my story, in a way that here was like an exhibition in Leipzig in Germany, and here is the documentary theater play called Performing Exiles back in Berlin. But I'm always using these opportunities to talk about others because, we were lucky, we escaped and lived happily ever after. But what about others? And if you are interested in our case, I encourage you to read this amazing article by US-based scholar Anastasia Osipova. It was published in the Russian Review, and it just, in more detail, investigates all of these performative actions as a way of resistance. But now I want to, move from the past to the current time. Do you know what is this number on the screen? Anyone? Any guesses? This is the number of political prisoners in Russia right now. At least 768. Among them, there are a lot of minors, gravely ill people, elderly people. And the worst thing about that is it's just a number. Probably the most famous political prisoners were released this August when we had political prisoners exchange. And when I was part of this documentary play, I was approaching audience and I was asking them, can you name 3 political prisoners? And they would all say Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Kara-Murza, Ilya Yashin. And if I would ask for a woman, they would be like, oh, Sasha Skachelenko. And now Navalny is killed. Yashin, Kara-Murza, and Skachelenko are released. But the problem is that no one knows the stories or the names of others. And there are so many stories that are worth telling. Do you know the name of this political prisoner? Not anyone. Is there a guess in the last row? Sorry? No. Okay. So just let me check her age. But okay, that's like a very illustrative example of. Okay. So she was 19 when she was arrested. Her name is Valeria Zotova. She's from Yaroslavl, and she got 6 years for attempt to set fire to a military building, which was never, which never succeeded. Do you know his name? Yeah, thank you. This is Igor Bolazeykin. He was 17 years old when he was arrested. He is from St. Petersburg. He suffers from autoimmune disease. It's called liver, also let me check, I'm so sorry. Liver fibrosis. And he was also arrested for attempt to set fire to a military building. And also, this is the fact that is very surprising to the international audience, that now there are still people throwing Molotov cocktails to the military buildings and then being imprisoned for, probably, they got the sentence of 6 years because they are minors, but normally people would be imprisoned for 20 plus years if there was cocktail Molotov involved. Do you know her name? This is Zarema Musaeva. She's 55 years old. She is ill with second type diabetes. And she was arrested simply because she's a mother of 2 Chechen human rights activists. So that was literally, that was it. They had some false accusation, but that was it. And now in Russia, it's really, really hard to protest. You could be arrested and detained for anything, for your clothes, for anything online that you post online, even retrospectively, even 5 years ago, even for private conversations or even private conversations at a doctor. So I think our responsibility, for sure, our as ex-political prisoners, but also our as anyone who is free and who is not facing this danger, is to talk about them and share their stories and amplifying their voices, as our support group was amplifying ours when we were under arrest. And this is an amazing project called Žuk, or Vyva. It's translated like a bug. And what they do, they help politically persecuted people flee Russia, so they evacuate people, and they're absolutely amazing. I wholeheartedly adore them, and they freed Olesa Krivtsova, another young political prisoner. So they're doing things that are not legal in Russia at all, but they can, free political prisoners in a very direct and practical way. So I encourage you to take a picture, to follow them on Instagram. They do have, their Instagram is English. They always need donations, and they have amazing short, cards telling about all of the important topics. And for sure, they need coverage in a way that even, one repost will make a difference, because through that, people might know more about their work and more about political prisoners. And another project that's really important is Solidarity Zone, and they are protecting militant political prisoners, those who are partisans, those who are throwing Molotov cocktails, because other human rights organizations sometimes they don't feel, ready to help them because that's too militant, because like terrorism is involved. So they're helping those like Valeria Zotova or Igor Blazeykin, those activists who choose the same method of resistance, like a very militant and a very, radical one. So I also encourage you to follow them on Instagram. They have all of their posts, both Russian and English, and they also need a lot of donations. So if you can, please donate. And also they always need your, reposts and spreading the word. And that's pretty much it. And thank you a lot for following this story with me. And I know it might be a little bit long and a little bit hot and a little bit traumatizing, but since I'm free, I always feel that, I won't be fully free until every political prisoner is free. And it was probably one of the happiest days of my life since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when I saw 17 political prisoners relieved and freed, and it was hard to believe my eyes before I literally saw them, at the airport. And for sure, my dream would be that, this number would just like turn to 0. And if we can do something, even like a tiny thing, to probably not make it 0 tomorrow, but make it less. If it's just a repost or, €10 or anything, please do it. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer questions. And there are also books on the first floor, so yes.
Thank you so much. First of all, this was amazing. I'm definitely stealing the first question because I can and I have the microphone. On a personal note, I was in Russia from like April to, or like March to September 2021, which was when you guys were arrested, and I did a lot of the court hearing, communal action, I guess. And I still meet people in London that we run into each other somewhere, we meet at a party, and they're like, I think I've seen you somewhere. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen you. Was it in front of a court? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. Obviously, much less traumatic of a memory than being in the court yourself. But I guess was just thinking about like this whole like ways of resistance and poetry as a way of resistance, and the book, and how I just wanted to, I guess, ask you how making the book, writing the book, putting everything together, how much of it is poetry that you've written during your house arrest and trial versus afterwards, kind of reflecting on it. And was it like a really emotional experience? How did you cope with it? And how do you feel now that it's out there? Yeah.
Thank you for this question. Actually, I was writing before the arrest, but I was never trying to publish it because I thought it's not that important, or, just like tiny little words. But in the time of the arrest, I started to feel that there's something I have like a moral responsibility to witness. And with this, I started to be letting myself to, try to publish some things. And in the end, it, brought me to publisher asking if I wanna make a book, which I was like very, insecure and shy about, but then it happened. And when I was with the editor, when we were choosing text for the book, I also discovered that it's really important for me to say that I'm not only a political prisoner. It's not, for sure it's like main story, I guess, for years and years, but I'm also a human being, and I also have so many other things that are dear to my heart. So in this book, I think probably only like 5 or 6 texts in the end of the book are connected to the house arrest, but all of the other are touching on topics such as trauma and memory and love and tenderness and religion. And for sure, like a lot of that is intertwined and connected. But yeah, I really felt that I want to like somehow have me who is not connected to, political persecution, this monitoring ankle bracelet, but it's still part of my story. But sometimes I'm just this like tiny fish and baby girl and something like that. So it's like, for sure, personal and collective and political are always, you can't separate one from each other, but sometimes just like chronologically or thematically, you want to bring like border between them. So that what I was trying to do in this book.
Should we open this conversation up to the audience? Do you have questions? I'm going to run around and give people the microphone.
Thank you so much. That was extremely moving and compelling, and I really appreciate everything that you said. I have a question about last words, final statements. I still don't really understand why this space is sort of allowed in the courtroom for these speeches to take place, because, as you know, they're being sort of anthologized, they're being distributed, they're very powerful, so many of them, of course, including your own is one of my very favorite. And I'm just really curious in the current circumstances why you think this space is being allowed. Do the authorities just not think this speech matters, or why is it still happening? In your opinion?
I guess they're quite cynical. I don't think they are type of people who believe that we could change the world with words or with poetry, but at the same time they're arresting people for just using some word, or if you go out on the street and hold a piece of paper with like 5 asterisks, they would suppose it's war, like 5 letters in Russian written there, and arrest you. But probably, I don't know, Russia is a traditional country, and that's such a huge tradition. And I'm also thinking, of Michel Foucault's parousia here, because it's like literally you've lost word in a way that you never know if you're next day gonna end up in prison or not. And this is what makes it so special and so lost. But probably they just don't believe that it could change anything, because they don't believe in anything themselves, and for them words don't matter. And we try to be the ones who say like words have meaning, words matter, probably like this. But if someone has some other idea, I would be happy to discuss, because for sure it's always hard to be guessing the logic behind their actions, because it's like very absurd all the time.
I also want to just put from this question the role of bureaucracy and the procedural kind of the fact that you were saying how you got the 51 books full of your case, and you just had to do all of these weird procedural things, and they had to have compare your face from the video to a picture of you, and I guess they just had to give you that the final word also because that's in the procedural bureaucratic
actually with this when we were somewhere in the middle of reading those volumes, the prosecutor said, well, Al Mikhailna, now this is the meaning of your life. no, like this is what you should be thinking about. And then I thought, oh no, the meaning of my life is to make not this. Like, you know, like the meaning of my life is to somehow, under those circumstances, make something else the meaning of my life. And that was like literally like existential resistance, in a way that you need to preserve yourself and not let this like bureaucracy and this, because for sure it's like very, you know, poisonous in a way that's like, it's like very, yeah, it's like rubbish. These are like a lot of words, but they don't mean anything, a lot of wasted paper, and you want to be like, okay, now I'm gonna write like 5 lines, but they would be, you know, meaningful, they would be powerful. I want to do something with words.
More questions?
Yeah, it's a one thing I just wanted to know. You said you had the little pink book when you were being interrogated. I didn't quite were you actually writing during your interrogations? Were you taking notes? How did it work?
Yeah, it was during interrogations, but when we, you know, when we have this like idea of interrogation, we probably think of this like spy movies where, you know, someone is like, you have a lamp, you know, in your face or something like that. But actually, just like very dull. You sit at some cabinet, then you have like some, I don't know, manager who's not a manager, but like investigative committee employee asking you some questions, and then you just like, no, I'm not answering that. No, 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 no. And then you're just like sitting there making jokes with your lawyer, or like at some point we were like correcting mistakes in their papers, because there was like a lot of grammatical mistakes. And yeah, we were like, okay, let me help you with this because I'm an editor, you know. And yeah, so it's like you have plenty of time to do whatever you want, like write poetry or anything. It's just like they are trying to kind of take your life from you, you know, because you need to be there. Like you can't escape it. If you don't come to interrogation, then they would like forcefully bring you there. So you need to be there physically, but with your mind, you could, you know, you could be free still.
Next question. Yes.
This might be too big of a question to answer now, but I was wondering, you mentioned lots of critical theorists and theory. I was wondering what your relationship is with like Marxist theory and Marxism, given Soviet history, and how previous political prisoners were, in the Soviet time, were disillusioned with kind of Marxist-Leninism. So I guess it's kind of a question about the left wing of Russia now and how you orientate yourself with that legacy.
I think that, like, I was born in 1998, so I never made it to Bolotnaya, but because I was like younger. But I mean, people from like Protestant families would go, but my family was not Protestant at all. I mean, they're not pro-Putin or anything. They were just like, you know, living their ordinary lives. So I was always like mesmerized by Occupy by and all of that, and I was always like, why that did not happen. And I was writing my undergrad thesis on representation of Walter Benjamin philosophy in like Russophone milieu, and I was talking to a lot of the people as like philosophers and poets who were active during the time of Bolotnaya, and I was like, but you felt that that was like the moment, you know, this like gate when the revolution could come, and they're like, yeah, probably back then we thought, but now we don't think it anymore. And yeah, for me, it's like such a important topic, and probably like concerning my own political persecution, the thing that I was kind of, I don't know, it might be, because for sure I don't support police as the institute, but when I was just like in my apartment face to face with this like police guys, they were something like, it's called, in Russian it's called sobor, it's like special, you know, so they're like high profile policemen. And when we're talking, and I really understood like I'm much more privileged than they are, in a way that you know, I'm from Moscow. I got really like good education. I got my like, I don't know, English tutor when I was a teenager or something like that. And with them, I mean, so it's like a class kind of question in a way that probably they had no other options than to go to police. For sure, it doesn't take their responsibility from them. And like a lot of them, they do torture, they do kill people, and they should all, you know, face court. But it would, like, what I want to avoid is that, you know, be sitting there and saying like, oh, I know all of these philosophers and you're stupid and you're just like policemen, because it's just like, because I was privileged enough to have access to higher education, it all happened. And, you know, when they were looking at our bookshelves, they couldn't guess our major. You know, they said like, oh, you're studying psychology or something. And we were talking to them, and I don't know, because like, I guess the main problem of Russia is the poverty and, you know, the inequality, and that's what we should be addressing. And also when we think of full-scale war, and, you know, it's like a very important topic in, but also in a way I faced, because also with this poem about the police officer, I was hesitating whether I should publish it or not, because I thought it could like ruin his career or something. Like I thought that he might be in danger because of this, because he was like brave enough to tell me like Russia will be free. And probably that's like too much of this like feminist care, in a way that like an ex-political prisoner shouldn't be caring about a policeman who came to arrest her and thinking like how it would harm him. But I did, so I think it took me like a year or something to publish it. It was like, now I hope he escaped police and now it wouldn't hurt him anymore. But also, it might sound ridiculous, but this is the way it is.
Okay, should we do one more and then we'll kind of just do some informal mingling and book signing? Yeah. Does anyone have a final? Yes.
Thank you, Ola. Thank you so much. I'm your friend. I'm a friend of Volodya, and I remember all this campaign, and I feel it's really like how we feel now. All of us live in exile, and but this campaign was amazing. I saw extremely support from a lot of movements, social movements, students, media outlet. I remember how we celebrated New Year in our main house in home arrest, and it was like a lot. It was a huge plan how we will change, you know, Russia with student support, and we discuss this with Armen a lot also as well. And I want to say thank you to you for now how you talk about political prisoners in Russia. It's extremely important. People really mentioned only well-known NGO, well-known project as memorial, but we have such more organization and grassroots initiatives like Anarchist Community who do work which is not kind of popular. And, you know, just thank you for your work, for your talk, for your care and passion and your energy. And my question is about student movement in Russia. How do you feel now? Do you see any kind of activities? Maybe you're still in contact with some movement in, I don't know, we have some communities in Tatarstan, in different regions, but how do you see student movement now? Yeah, thank you.
As I was saying in this video that got us into trouble, the young people were always the ones fighting for rights and freedoms, but the difference now is that I do believe that the best way to be fighting from Russia is to do it in a partisan way, to do it like in a very, you know, hiding your face, making it as anonymous, as confidential as possible, because with that, like, the level of repression is so high that I guess like before, like the time you're, you know, talking about, or even before, we had this idea that if we are brave enough, if we speak up, if we all gather outside the course, because when I was doing my undergrad, my professors would cancel our seminars if they would be at the same time of demonstration, because we would all go there, and it would be useless, or wasting our time in a classroom when we could be out on the street. But now we see what's the root, and now I guess that all of the unless something changes drastically, all of the activities should be that's why you're from Feminist Anti-War Resistance, so that's why those activists who are from Russia, they don't show their faces, and the first thing we need to care about is that their security. And so for sure, young people still fight, but just in terms of the repressions, it should be a very strategical planning, I'd say, of this fighting, not to because now I'm everything I say, I feel like it's almost like a survivor bias, in a way that I managed to escape, and I'm we were having flash mobs in front of the court, but now it's not happening anymore. Now they don't even put people under house arrest anymore. You go straight to pretrial jail, then you go to prison. That's it. I mean, there are some miracle stories, but say that's how I perceive it. Thank you for your kind words and for your question.
Thank you so much. I think, this is a great, moment to stop the formal part and move into just kind of, if anyone wants Alla's book, or just have a drink and chat a bit more. Thank you so much to Alla. I feel like this is a really important snapshot of Russia at a time pre-full-scale invasion that almost feels unreal now, but was very much a reality of many of us in the room, and it's just kind of puzzling and horrifying, and a lot to think about. But thank you so much for Alla. And on a slightly lighter note, we do have a book fair happening on starting on the 13th of December and lasting for a week. And we are selling many books about, both in Russian and in English, about opposition movements in Russia and various other things. Do come and support us. Thank you.